This is the final session of today, our 8th annual ISNTD Bites. This morning, you would have seen some very, very interesting sessions. All the way through today, all the speakers have mentioned the absolute importance of engaging communities. Everybody has said this, and we know this ourselves from our own work. It's the absolute vital step if we're going to get to those disease elimination control targets enshrined by the WHO's roadmap for NTD control to 2030. We have to involve the community, the affected communities. We just have to. It's impossible to do this without them. So we thought, instead of just having a session that's just going to talk about the importance of community. We all know the importance of the community and involving them. Let's see how we can leverage those communities. How can we do that? And so we thought, we've got a very varied kind of flavor to this particular session. I'm joined from Kenya by Dr. Beatrice Muriithi, from the Social Science and Impact Assessment Unit, the International Center of Insect Physiology and Ecology, the ICIPE, world-class research facility in Kenya. And I think, it's from that particular organization that from the Social Science and Impact Assessment Unit that Dr. Beatrice Muriithi is going to speak today about the kind of farmer perceptions. I'll come to that in a second. So we're very happy to welcome you, Dr. Muriithi. We also have Professor Marco Salvemini from the University of Naples in Federico to Italy, beautiful south of Italy, looking really at a very, very interesting convergence of communities, art and science, tackle these vector-borne diseases. And he's really focused on an island there, the case study, as it were, of the island of Procida. Be very interesting because we ourselves run the ISNTD Festival every year, where we give our awards out for science communication for NTDs, apps, print, comics, television, radio. We have that every year, I believe in March next year. And on apps, we thought we have to, in the age of social media, these communities, you'll find there's a certain irony when you're dealing with neglected tropical diseases. Most of the affected communities we deal with are highly social and highly mobile. We wanted to involve the app-based approach. So Professor James from the University of California, Berkeley, the Social Apps Lab, and Dr. Josefina Coloma from the University of California, Berkeley, are going to be speaking about their DengueChat. They're the three speakers, and big warm welcome to all three of you. Thank you so much for making time for this. I'd say to the audience that please do say hello in terms of your name, obviously your affiliation, i.e. the organization, and the country that you're joining us from. That makes our life easy. And we're getting a hello there from Bior Garang from the south of Sudan in terms of their neglected tropical diseases organization, Landos. Hi there to you, Bior. Again, I know you've been active on Twitter as well earlier in the day, so thank you for that. It's vitally important to kind of get everybody involved in this particular section. So these sessions are designed for the audience to have their questions put forward. Please do feel free to put questions forward in the chat box. We will try our hardest to inculcate those, channel those into the Q&A at the end. I think that's enough from me. And I think we'll move to the first speaker. So I think I'd like to call to the floor Dr. Beatrice Muriithi from the Social Science and Impact Assessment Unit at the International Center of Insect Physiology and Ecology in Kenya, talking really about farmer perceptions and the willingness to pay for a new kind of livestock pest control technology. It's for the tsetse fly, a tsetse repellent collar, and it's centered in the Kwale County in Kenya. I think it would be very interesting to see how that kind of this approach works. So I think over to you, Dr. Muriithi, and the floor is yours. Okay?
Thank you very much for the introduction. All right, then I'll go ahead and thank you very much for inviting me to share these results from one of our projects here at icipe. As you correctly introduced, icipe is the International Center for Insect Physiology and Ecology. We are based in Nairobi, but we have our satellite offices in Western Kenya and also in Ethiopia. And we work with partners all across Africa. Today I'm going to talk about the farmers' perceptions and willingness to pay for a novel livestock pest control technology, which we call the tsetse repellent collar. This is based on one of our work that we did in Kwale County of Kenya, one of the heavily tsetse infested areas in Kenya and also in Africa. And this work has been published in PLOS Neglected Tropical Diseases. And I must say that's why I think Muriithi got our work, and she requested that we share, or rather I share on behalf of the other co-authors this work. So I'm honored to share these results, and feel free to ask questions. And yeah, I hope you'll find the presentation interesting. Just a way of introduction, livestock, of course, as we all know, contributes significantly to the agricultural GDP and supports quite a significant number of smallholders in developing countries. And this is through employment, of course, income, and improving crop productivity through provision of draft power and manure. And therefore, any effort to reduce poverty and improve food security and nutrition requires the use of livestock to the full potential. However, livestock production is constrained by various challenges, and one of the biggest challenges, the tsetse transmitted and more African trypanosomiasis. And this is actually highlighted as one of the major livestock development challenges in Africa. The ATT, as I'll call it, moving forward, causes anemia, emaciation, and production loss, and of course mortality. And it's estimated that it causes about 3 million cattle deaths in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa. And of course, about 46 million cattle at risk of contracting the disease. Therefore, direct production losses are estimated to be about 1.2 billion each year. And the vector, the tsetse that transmit ATT, occurs in landscape of about 37 sub-Saharan African countries. So this, of course, we can say it's a major threat to livelihood of so many households, and especially the poor and vulnerable households in the rural areas. The main method that has been used to curb ATT has been the use of trypanosomiasis, or rather the drugs. However, we know all the associated drug risks with drug use, including drug resistance and other health concerns with the drug metabolites in the animal products, milk and meat. And therefore, there is a need to have alternative control measures that really target the vector instead of targeting the disease. And over the years, icipe has developed both community level and also hard level strategies. And this picture here summarizes the different kinds of community level and hard level strategies. So as you can see, at community level, we have the tsetse fry traps, the targets or the screens, which impregnated or have insecticides, and then we have the pounds technologies. And although these first three, the community level strategies, are also eco-friendly, they are they're expensive to implement and also hard to sustain, because partly they are viewed as public goods since they are applied at area-wide level, and therefore they have been a bit difficult to sustain. Therefore, icipe has more focused on the household or hard level strategies, and this is where we have this novel tsetse repellent collar. These are just highlights of some of the pictures of the collars, which has advanced. If you see on, we have this second one here with the metal bar. This was the very initial concept, which was not cost effective. After assessing whether it was feasible for the smallholder farmers, we realized it was not feasible. So there was need to revise or to come up with a rather cheaper material that farmers could have afford. And this is how this canvas collar came about, which is the current one now in the market. And down here you see the tsetse repellent brand, packed as a sachet and also packed as a bottle. So a number of studies have been done on the efficacy of the repellent collar, and it has been found to be safe to the humans, to the livestock, and also to the environment, and also effective in reduction of the AAT infections. And although the collar exhibits all these economic and environmental benefits among the livestock farmers, it hasn't been commercialized since it has been on more or on trial basis. So wide commercialization and adoption of this technology will depend so much on how farmers conceive or how they perceive the efficiency and also the cost, and if they accept it. And this is why this study was actually done to assess farmers' knowledge, first of all, and their perception and practices towards management of tsetse flies and ATT, and evaluate or assess their willingness to pay for this novel collar, and also highlight factors that may affect the willingness to pay, both positive and also negative. So to do this, this work was carried out in Kwale County, as I mentioned at the beginning. Kwale County is one of the heavily tsetse-infested areas in Kenya, with a preference of about 56%, and therefore considered as a hotspot for the tsetse. And we followed purposive sampling method to select the sub-counties and the wards and the villages. As you can see on this picture, we have the National Reserve in the middle there. The National Reserve is actually a reservoir of many tsetse flies and alternative hosts of the fly. And that's why there is a huge burden of control of tsetse and ATT around this area. And so the selection, we selected, as you can see on the map, the green dots there, which represents the sampled farmers. They are just villages that are adjacent to the park, and we use probability proportional to size approach just to distribute the sample across all the different locations. And our study involved 632 households, which were randomly selected. And then to assess or to decide the willingness to pay, many of you may not be probably conversant. We use many methods, but for this study we chose to use a contingent variation method to decide the farmer's willingness to pay for the collar. And basically we chose this because it's a survey-based stated preference method where producers are evaluated on a product that has not yet been traded in the market. And there are three different kinds of approaches that could be used. This is what we call the single bounded CV model, or the double bounded, or the multi-bounded. I'll not explain all that, but for this study we chose what we call double-bounded CV model, and the double-bounded is just means that there's a first offer or the first bid that is offered to the respondent, and then a second bid that is dependent on the first one. So once the respondent says yes to the first bid, a lower bid is offered, and no, a higher bid is offered, and the same case when they say no, then a lower bid is offered. And just to expound a bit on how we recited this willingness to pay, the first stage was first of all to assess the farmers' awareness of the tsetse repellent collar technology, but just ask them whether they have ever heard about the technology. So irrespective of the awareness, the respondents were presented with a short explanation of the scientific background of the collar technology. This included the benefits, and not just the monetary benefits, but also the environmental benefits, as well as the costs. And then we presented these pictures that shows the older version of the collar as well as the new version that is due for commercialization. And as you can see, the costs are stated there. The new canvas collar is estimated to cost about $1,475 per year per animal. In fact, before we did this, we did not reveal the cost because we wanted first of all to ask the farmers, which is the next stage here, to state their costs that they go. I mean, for treating an animal for tsetse and ATT per year if they do not have other technologies like this one. So once they stated that amount, that was our first bid, called the double-bounded CV approach. So that was our first bid. And then whatever that bid was, we asked them, would you be willing to pay for a collar that costs the same amount to service the whole year as your treatment for animal for 1 year? So if they said yes, then we added premium, which we added a certain percentage of premium, and then asked them again, would you still be willing to pay if we increase this amount by a certain percentage? And this percentage is just programmed. There were four different random percentages, which they were randomly picked by our program, the software that we use for data collection. So this is how we did it, and yeah, you can see the pictures. And then I will not dwell on the regression, on how we calculated the mean willingness to pay, and also how we calculated the dependence of willingness to pay. So the results, I'm going to highlight a bit more of, first of all, the descriptive analysis, just to give give a background of how the cattle keeping in the area is, and also livestock pests, how farmers perceive the different pests and diseases in the area, and also some of the practices and awareness or knowledge of the farmers about the disease and the pest. So as you can see on this slide, livestock ownership in Kwale, most of the farmers own indigenous cows, and this is somehow cultural, but also dependent on the suitability of the animals within this area. The exotic breeds, they don't do well, and this is mainly because of the high infestation of tsetse and ticks, according to the farmers and also according to the county government, because they also gave the same sentiments about the non-suitability of exotic breeds in the area. And the majority of the farmers actually keep animals for draft power. That's why you see so many of them with oxen. And they had a mean of about 2.8 oxen per household. And of course, we had other categories of livestock. When it comes to pest and diseases, as I mentioned, or rather, as we expected, tsetse flies and ticks were highlighted as the major livestock pests or major livestock constraints in those areas. And in terms of diseases, tsetse vectored trypanosomiasis, and among others, you can see also the East Coast fever is the disease associated with tick, and among other diseases. And then the next question was, then how are the livestock management technologies available in the area? And as you can see here, we sought to know whether vaccination are available, curative treatment, natural breeding, artificial breeding. And you can see our close, for instance, AI is not very common. I think this was expected because most of the animals are indigenous, and but of course, this was also cited by some of the farmers that there are not so many health experts within the area who can administer AI to the animals. On farmers' knowledge, perception, and management of tsetse and trypanosomiasis, we asked about the different clinical signs and symptoms of trypanosomiasis. And our target was to see how many farmers could correctly identify for about 4 ATT clinical signs. And we realized only 22 of the respondents could correctly identify the disease, implying that there's a gap in knowledge. Of course, if the farmers don't have good knowledge on the disease, then they are likely to misdiagnose their animals, and of course that leads to wrong treatment. However, asking them about the perceived tsetse infestation and severity of the trypanosomiasis, there was a positive, or rather you can see most of the farmers perceived the preference of the tsetse to be low at that time, and also mortality. And the low preference rate was associated with CPES effort in introducing the household and community level tsetse control methods. And since we had done a focus group discussion before we did the survey, the same sentiments were highlighted by the focus group discussion respondents, that ATT had reduced, preference had reduced, and also the mortality of the animals had significantly reduced since icipe started working in the area. The other question was then what are the strategies the farmers use other to control trypanosomiasis and tsetse? And we see cultural practices still playing quite a major role. For instance, avoiding tsetse infested areas. Those are the areas next to the park. Taking the animals out to graze, and clearing bushes. Those still play a big role in, or rather, farmers perceive them to still play a big role, and they could be promoted along the tsetse control technologies. But as you can see in this slide, we still have a significant number of farmers still using trypanoside, the drug for control of ATT. And of course, what we found is that not so many although they were using them, they did not perceive them to be very effective. And unfortunately, not so many of them were aware of the negative effects of the use of these drugs. And also the disposal, there are still gaps in how they dispose leftovers of these drugs once they spray the animals. But what we learned from the qualitative survey, the earlier FDG discussion, although these gaps are still identified here, most farmers said that they had improved their knowledge on treating the animals, and how they determined the amount of chemicals to use and the timings through some of the trainings that have been offered by icipe. When looking at the willingness to pay for the collar, what you see here, for instance, we had when we offered the first bid, and the first bid I said was the cost that a farmer incurred to treat an animal for ATT and tsetse for the whole year. That's buying the drugs as well as others, spraying and all the other methods that they were using to treat the animals. 63% of them agreed, or rather were willing to pay the same amount. On average, this was coming to about $2,673 or about $26 per animal per year. 63% of them agreed. The 37% that rejected that first bid were offered a discount, as I said, between 15 and 60% of the first bid. And when we offered this, for instance, those who were offered 30% of the bid, 39 of them accepted, adding this to by 7% of those who accepted. On the other hand, those 63% were offered a premium, or rather the price was increased by a percentage of between 15 and 60. And when this was done, only 14%, this is not, it's supposed to be the other side. Only 14% of them accepted. But of course, we expect the percentage of additional accepting to go to reduce as the amount increases. Looking at the mean willingness to pay, this is the logistic analysis. You can see the first, we have the conditional and conditional. The conditional means we assume that there are no other factors affecting willingness to pay. So we do not include the explanatory variables. And what we saw, the mean willingness to pay was about $33.51 or about $33. And this is about 23% over and above the average cost of treating one mature animal for tsetse, fries, and ATT complication per year. And even after we added the other explanatory variables, which is the conditional model up there, we still got a significant, or rather mean willingness to pay higher by 23, or the other one is 25, by 23% over and above the average cost of treating a mature animal for tsetse. And if you recall, the mean, the cost of icipe cola is estimated about $1,475, or about $15 per animal per year. So the willingness to pay is much, much higher than the estimated cost of the repellent cola. Of course, then implying that there is hope that this cola is going to be purchased. And I must say, now it's about 2 years since we carried out this survey, and since then, the farmers have actually been purchasing these collars. Just a highlight of the factors affecting the willingness to pay. We saw gender, education level, and perception that the disease is highly prevalent, then affected the willingness to pay positively. The gender finding is expected, as female heads are often associated with limited access to production resources that facilitate or that would facilitate adoption of new technologies. Well, of course, education enhances processing and interpretation of new information, and overall production constraints and increase of farm inputs. As a way of conclusion, or to summarize my my study, where, as you recall, the results shows that most of the farmers reported sassafras as the leading indicator in infesting pests in the area. But there was a knowledge gap of by the fact that only 22% of the interviewed farmers could correctly identify at least 4 clinical signs of the disease. But although we see many of the farmers using the drugs to for management of the disease, 50% of them did not perceive the drug to be effective. And but unfortunately, only a few also are aware of the harmful effect of the triponocidal drugs. And about 89% of the respondents were aware of the icipe, tsetse repellent collar, and 30% of them, I didn't mention this, were already using them, had used them for field trial. And 63% of the respondents were willing to pay for icipe, tsetse repellent collar at the same cost as treating their own animals for ATT. And on average, the willingness to pay was about $34 per animal per year. So as a way of recommendation, looking at our results and also using complementary information from the focus group discussions, and this is a picture of myself conducting the focus group discussions, we recommend wider dissemination and commercialization of the high-level tsetse control approach to reduce AAT transmission and thus enhance food security and farm incomes among the affected rural communities. And besides the uptake of the tsetse repellent collar, can be enhanced through training to bridge these gaps that have been identified, and also encourage women also to join the trainings, and therefore enhance the adoption rate in these tsetse-prone areas in Kenya. And just to mention, we have also published recently a paper on potential economic benefits of controlling trichomoniasis using the same repellent collar, this one focusing on sub-Saharan Africa. And we have other papers that are upcoming, microeconomic impact of the tsetse collar interventions, and also evaluation of the economic burden of the disease in Africa. And with that, I want to say thank you for listening, and I welcome questions.
Thank you very, very much there for that, Beatrice, in terms of that presentation. I thought it was quite a striking, your recommendations were there. It was quite striking that whilst 90% knew the fly causes the disease, that only 20% were aware of the actual symptoms of it. A massive gap there. I wonder what's driving the actual initial use of the how to put it, the triponocidal approach. I wonder what type of communication they're receiving to make them take that as opposed to this. I think that's very interesting. And turning this into a kind of service, i.e. the willingness to pay, I think that's a very interesting kind of development there, especially when you look at the kind of NTD roadmap, the WHO's roadmap, where they want kind of this country-led approach, ownership, as it were, of diseases. And that's really going to come from within the countries. And this kind of turning this into a service, or the mentality into this is a service, you have to pay. I think that's a very interesting development in its own right. But I'm sure it'll come up when we get to the Q&A. Hopefully, I think it should come up. But thank you very, very much for that, Beatrice. That's a wonderful presentation. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
We wanted to look at communities, as I said earlier, from many, many different kind of kind of approaches, and that was one of them. And we thank you for that. And that kind of takes us to the what I felt was really another important thing in that particular presentation was the appropriateness. You really kind of listened to the communities. You really were engaging with them and involving them in the entire kind of process all the way through. And that kind of modality really comes down to being able to not just speak the same language, but touch the trigger points within them, i.e. building the case for using that particular technology. And so that, in my mind, leads very nicely to the next speaker, Professor Marco Salvemini, who's going to look at communities, art and science, i.e. the convergence of these to tackle vector-borne diseases. And I'd like to pass the floor over to you, Professor Salvemini.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to this very interesting meeting. And today I will talk to you about our approach we are using in testing on a small island that is Procida, an Italian island in Mediterranean Sea, where we are trying to set up the proper condition to apply the sterile insect technique against the Asian tiger mosquito, Aedes albopictus. And we are trying to work, let's say, to produce something new, some new approach to involve the community in helping us in get these important results for the island and for our region, that is to free an area from this kind of vector mosquito, this species of this vector species. So, as you know, mosquitoes are considered the world's dirtiest animal species. It's able to kill every year more people than human, so it's really a big problem. And according to a recent study published on the Lancet journal, in less than 8 years, up to 8 billion people could be at risk of mosquito-borne diseases. So between mosquito species, invasive mosquito species such as mosquito of Aedes genera are considered of, let's say, special interest because of their prominent role as vector of disease, and also because of their capacity to invade novel environments. And this is exactly the case of Aedes albopictus in Europe. This species arrived in 1990 in Italy, in Genova city, and then quickly spread over most of Mediterranean countries, and recently started to move also to northern regions. The fight against mosquitoes, as for many insect pests, has been done to date mainly by the use of pesticides, but this approach is, we can say that it's a blessing and curse approach because of side effects on these substances on the environment. For example, the problem with the beneficial insects that could be eliminated with the same substances, and also the problem of resistance occurring in vector population, as discussed in previous session. An eco-friendly alternative approach for vector control could be considered is the sterile insect technique, as briefly shown in this video produced by the International Atomic Energy Agency.
Mosquitoes. The battle continues, but the battlefield is changing. Throughout the millennia, people have fought mosquitoes and the diseases they transmit. Now, with globalization and with climate change, mosquitoes and diseases are spreading. Mosquitoes are becoming resistant to insecticides. The diseases they carry are becoming resistant to drugs. And mass use of pesticides required for control has negative effects on public health, on beneficial organisms, and on the environment. But there is another battle plan, the sterile insect technique, SIT. SIT is a type of birth control for insects. Already successful in controlling major crop and livestock insect pests, SIT is being refined and validated to control mosquitoes. Special factories rear millions of male mosquitoes, sterilize them with radiation, and then release them into target areas at regular intervals. They mate with the wild females, but the males are sterile. There are no offspring. When sufficient sterile male mosquitoes are released, each successive generation will have fewer wild mosquitoes, and the population will be suppressed. Success will depend on people, in villages, towns, and also cities. collaborating with public campaigns to eliminate mosquito breeding sites in combination with traditional control methods and the release of sterile males. This integrated management reduces the mosquito population enough to prevent disease transmission and nuisance biting. As there is no environmental pollution, no development of resistance, it is sustainable. SIT offers an additional method to control mosquitoes and the diseases they carry, and thus to reduce human suffering in many parts of the globe.
So I am a molecular geneticist, and I work in my laboratory at the Department of Biology of the University of Naples, Federico II, on sex determination genes that could be used to improve the sex separation system for the sterile insect technique. Because for the application of this technique, just males are released, because females, as for agricultural pests, are the main agent of damage, and in case of mosquitoes or other insect vector species, they can transmit the disease even if they are sterile. So you need just males. So since some years, I also began to deal with the application of this control method in the field, trying in particular to contribute to the improvement of one of its key aspects, that is the participation of a community living in the area subject of control programs. In fact, without the participation of the community, the battle against mosquitoes is considered impossible to win. And this is mainly due to the fact that mosquitoes live where humans live, and we need people participation to have a capillary access to a territory, including private properties, and their involvement to maintaining the density of the species low to then apply SIT. But also it's a matter of acceptance of the technology you want to use on a territory that you need to build up, creating a trustful relationship with people living there. I firmly believe that, as the famous aphorism attributed to Galileo Galilei states, that behind every problem there is an opportunity. So starting from this belief, I asked myself, but is it possible to transform the threat posed by mosquitoes into an opportunity for the development of a community? And so I imagined a population of mosquitoes that attack and a community of people that respond in a collaborative way rather than in an individual way. And so I designed a high-impact action that, through the direct involvement of a community in a project, first of research and then of control using SIT, can not only lead to the successful elimination of the mosquito species in the area, but also could act as a driving force for the development of the community itself. And to test this idea, we selected a beautiful island, that is the Procida Island in Naples Gulf, as a field testing site. This island has unique features for an SIT-based mosquito control program. Because firstly, it's a small island, only 3.7 square kilometers. It has a high density of Asian tiger mosquito, and then a high density of human population here. There are about 10,000 inhabitants living on the island, and this number doubles during summer because of tourism. So the island has a density similar to cities, so it's a challenging place where to apply the technology. And the last but not least, there is an administration and citizens that are sensitive to environmental issues. So the first step in our project was to interact with these politicians or administrators and ask them help and support for our project. Firstly, helping us in selecting volunteers that could start the work with us to study the mosquito population. And so what was exactly what we did, and we designed an Ovitrap monitoring over 1 year using Ovitraps to evaluate the temporal dynamics on the island of Aedes albopictus population, and half of the Ovitraps were managed by these volunteers. And the mayor itself of Procida Island served us as a volunteer, helped us a lot, just doing himself actually in his garden, managing one Ovitrap for a whole mosquito reproductive season from April to November. And this was a big achievement for us because of the positive example effects that it had on other volunteers, helping us in convincing them to participate to complete the program. I have here a very short message that the major of Procida sent for us for this talk.
There's no sound.
Then, with the help of our volunteers, we involved 80 more families to study the spatial distribution of the species over the island using 100 ovitraps. And then in 2018, we finally analyzed the density per hectare of the mosquito population by releasing 20,000 sterile marked males and applying the marked release recapture technique with the help of 30 more families. Here in this picture, you can see the day of release. We did it with people of the island, students from our university, and the major itself, and the Conselho Rossello Lauro. So thanks to the active participation of citizens in our project, we collected baseline data about Aedes albopictus bionomics on this island. And with this data, we started to answer these three important questions that are required for the planning of the future SIT test on the island. When to perform the sterile male release, when to do it, and how many sterile males should be released to suppress the local population. So about the first question, we identified as the best period, April and May, because this is the period in which the population starts to arise after the winter, and it's important to do the release before then the density of mosquito reach a too high level, as observed in July and in September. We also observed a quite uniform distribution of mosquito on the island, so the whole territory should be managed and treated with sterile males and not just part of the island. And we observed a very high density, in some cases around 10,000 mosquito per hectare on the island in September. So in the top density period of the mosquito dynamics. And this underlines how it's important to act before that this density is obtained by the local population. All the results of this 5-year-long project has been recently published on PLOS Neglected Tropical Disease Journal. So if you want to know something more about our results, you can have a look to our paper that is freely accessible on the journal website. So the very high density that we observed in September in Procida highlights the necessity to work to reduce the mosquito density before to apply SIT. And this is a key aspect of SIT technology, as recently discussed in this paper published by researchers of the International Atomic Energy Agency we are collaborating with for our project. And so we planned, as the next step in our project, a larval breeding site elimination campaign to reduce the local mosquito density through community participation. This was a key part of the project because most of the people on the island, they didn't know about larval stage of mosquito that occur in water, and then the simple way to fight mosquito that is eliminating breeding sites, eliminating standing water. So with this aim, during these years of activity on the island, we did a lot of efforts to engage the community and to invite them to participate in our project. And we organized public events in the frame of the European Research Night program to teach to citizens something more about mosquito biology and control methods and good practice they could apply in their garden to limit the mosquito spreading. With a special focus on children, on young people and students that are a very key resource in this community engagement efforts, because students can be taught on how to manage mosquito and to solve mosquito problem, and then they can teach their parents at home. So they are very powerful trainers that they can not only represent the future generation, make them aware about the problem and how to solve it could be a way to have future adults just ready to fight mosquito, but also they can teach their parents in the present and helping us enrich every family on the island. In September of this year, to further increase the participation of the community and to identify larval breeding sites, we started a campaign, a citizen science campaign using a smart app that is the mosquito alert app, by which citizens could signal and eliminate then larval breeding sites. And we have a very good reply by the population, of the population involved in the application, the use of this smart app. But despite the success of many of the activities we performed on the territory, as a scientist, we experience that we have not enough and proper skill to foster engagement with the community. Because community engagement, in our experience, was not only a matter of study and explain. We understood that relationship building with the community is the most important part of the story. And so it's not just a matter of involvement of a big number of people, because a community is not is more than the sum of the people living in a place. Community has its own story, its own traditions, and you have to work with them as let's say, an unique object, let's say. So not like the sum of the individuals. And so how and where to ask for an help to define a better approach to involve the community in our program. We try to imagine an alternative and interdisciplinary approach involving artists. And we were very lucky because in Naples, we have a very special kind of artists that are called the relational artists. They are students and teachers of the School of New Technology of Art of our Fine Art Academy in Naples. Relational art, most probably some of you knows what it is, some other not. If you want more information about it, you can have a look to the website of Tate Gallery website that is set in London. But briefly, in relational art, the audience is envisaged as a community. So rather than the artwork being an encounter between a viewer and an object, relational art produces encounters between people. Through these encounters, a meaning is elaborated collectively rather than in the space of individual consumption. And so this is exactly what we want to do using science. So we asked to these special artists if they could be interested in helping us, and they have a very big interest because they are special artists that are used to use the scientific methods too in their approach of building installation and on working with people to create relationship. And so as a first step in our collaboration, we asked them an help to design a communication campaign for our project. And they produced for us two fantastic ideas. The first one is this acronym, ZZZ, that is the sound of mosquito buzzing. And that in Italian means zero mosquito area, zona zero zanzare. And then this big red circle that represents both the objective of the project, that is to reach zero mosquito area, but it represents also the community in form of a circle. And using a big object built by these guys, they started to work with us on the island to involve people and to feel as an important part of the community and to help us to participate to this scientific community growing on the island, working with us to control the mosquito. I will show in this very short video produced by these guys some images of the experiment we did together on the island. Last year, a very unexpected event occurred. That was the Procida Island was elected as the Italian capital of culture for next year in 2022. And the organization leading this project, it's a very interesting project that is putting a lot of efforts in the direction of community participation to cultural events, inserted in the program, in the official program, also a specific subset of activities that are focused on citizen participation, including citizen science. So together with the organization of Procida 2022, and together with the artists, we started to design some novel kind of activities to be performed on the island. And they are a very big number of very big group of people, of students and teachers. And we designed an innovative door-to-door campaign with the objective to eliminate as much as possible larval breeding site and female mosquito on the island, using an efficient community engagement and relationship building approach. To do this, we are planning to act on the territory, so in the field, arm to arm, together, artists and scientists. So create something like mixed teams of artists and scientists and working together to engage the local community. We have designed new mosquito traps with a special design, always in with the idea to involve people as much as possible. That these objects will be 3D printed and will represent the present by which to start the relationship building process with citizens, because these artists are used to have this approach. They start with the present to interact, to start relationship with people, and then from the relationship that starts, everything goes on. We are also planning a new creative representation of the community that will participate in our project that will be set up on the island as a big artistic installation next year. And we are also designing a novel, creative way to communicate through a big high-tech installation in real time on the island the results of the mosquito elimination efforts that people will help us to produce. I hope to have the opportunity in future to show you the results of our innovative approach that we will evaluate through entomological monitoring, but also by socio-economical analysis evaluations. And we hope to contribute with these efforts to open novel ways to fight insect vectors that could be then applied also in other parts of the world to win our battle against vector-borne diseases. At the same time, we hope to have a positive impact on the community itself by fostering positive interaction between community members, showing the importance of applying scientific methods to solve environmental problems and helping to strengthen the relationship between citizen and scientists is so much important in a pandemic times like the present one we are living and experiencing. And so I wish to thank all the people that helped us in these 6 years now, including the manager of the on Procida Island, Raimondo Ambrosino, all the other volunteers that helped us a lot, and all the members of my research team at University of Naples and collaborators from my university, from La Sapienza University, and from Centro Agricoltura Ambiente, Professor Romeo Bellini, that produced for us the sterile maize, as well as the colleagues from International Atomic Energy Agency that supported us a lot during these years of the projects. And of course, all of you for your attention. Thank you.
Marco, what can I say? That was absolutely amazing. There's so much to unpack from that. I mean, we asked you to be in this particular session for a reason. Andiamo insieme, perfect.
Yeah.
We are very aware of this whole kind of aesthetic in terms of the art aesthetic that you mentioned. We ourselves run a behavioral insights company, developmental theatre called Acting for Health. So we've been out in field working with communities in Uganda, Ethiopia, Tanzania with Imperial College for schisto transmission, behavior around water contact. So we're very much into all this developing kind of with the community. So hats off to you guys. I'm pretty sure that we're going to be asking you to come to our festival and show us the results that you mentioned at the end in your end slides in our Science Communication Festival in 2022. But what an amazing project. You mentioned mayors, very interesting, because right at the beginning, early on in the day, we had a very special session looking at the built environment and the effects, the approaches to built environment for vector control. As you probably well know, United Nations Habitat, UN Habitat, and the World Health Organization who were presenting have just signed a memorandum of understanding. And in that particular session, one of the points that was made was that we have to reach out to the political class with this entomological data that we're all generating, that we've all got technical data. However, in real terms, you have politics and you have real politic. In terms of the real politic, it's not the ministers of health we need to reach, it's the mayors, the mayoral class, because they're representing the people, they can engage the communities. That was a beautiful illustration of exactly that. That and the fact that you're involving the children. I mean, I don't know any better salespeople than children. We have children ourselves, and to involve them in this, give them that, and that's a point that actual Dr. Raman Veliduin made earlier in the day, and Professor Olaf Horstick made as well, Dr. Fiona Shenton, that educating on entomological lines at an earlier and earlier age, not just leaving it until a university setting, is really going to help change perceptions around disease, awareness of transmission, all sorts of things. I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I think that's a great infrastructure to build upon. And I think we'll have some very serious conversations moving forward with yourself, Professor, and your team. I'd be delighted to carry that conversation on. So thank you very, very much for that wonderful presentation. A lot of people, Anatole Miranda from Uganda, entomological head in Uganda, vector control team there, wonderful presentation. And Ecology Velo, great presentation, Marco. Got some great people here who are, giving you a great. Muhammad Ajmal Khan from the vector control team for dengue in Pakistan. Thanks for a nice presentation. I'm just going to give a quick shout out to some of the people on this in terms of our wonderful audience. We're delighted to know that we've been joined also by the head of the Centers for Disease Control in Qatar, Professor El Mubashir Farag has joined us. So welcome, assalamu alaikum, and welcome. Leo Barrett, Dr. Leo Barrett has probably just gone off. He's in Bangkok from the Malaria Consortium. We have had quite a few hellos. So Daniel Velaquez from Mexico, from CARE India, Dr. Arti Rama, Entomological Surveillance Officer. I'm sure people are learning and looking at how this could be applied to where they are. Children are prevalent right across the communities we deal with. It's an asset that needs to be brought into the equation, and you've demonstrated that absolutely clearly. Wonderful community engagement. Quite a few of the shout outs. Professor Niang from the Dakar from Senegal. He's thrown some questions in as well, so we'll come to those in the end. Lots of different people on here from different disciplines, which is exactly what we wanted. Olana Waraju Comfort, brilliant. It really was. So thank you very, very much for that. I'm going to now move to our final speaker, or the final kind of team that's going to, thank you for that. Thank you very much. Grazie mille. We're going to move to our last speaker. We have Professor James Holston from the University of California, Berkeley, from the Social Apps Lab, and also from the University of California, Berkeley, Dr. Josefina Coloma. Obviously, the irony in all of the kind of NTD settings, if you want to call it an irony, is that these people we talk about neglected tropical diseases. These are neglected communities, neglected people in many, many senses of that word. These are diseases of poverty we're talking about, structural poverty in many settings. And so, therefore, there is this irony there that it's these communities that are actually highly social and highly mobile. There's an irony there. Social media is everywhere. Phone connections are not what we think they are here, and I'm sure you all know this yourself. So the power of apps really needs to be harnessed. We ourselves, I mentioned earlier, run every year a science communication festival called the ISNTD Festival, exactly for this, where we give out prizes for apps, film, television, mass communication, print, comics, games, you name it. For NTDs, and not just communicating, but making a change through that type of approach. Next year will be our 6th annual festival, and that'll be on around about March time, but we'll send some more data on that. We wanted all of that to say we wanted to have a look at the social apps, or the apps kind of platforms out there, and this caught our eye. And so I'm going to hand the James Holston and Josefina Coloma for a talk on DengueChat, social and software platform for the lovely word community-based arbovirus vector control. Over to you.
I want to thank you very much for this invitation on behalf of myself and the team that developed DengueChat. I'm here with Dr. Josefina Coloma. We're both from the University of California at Berkeley. And I also direct the Social Apps Lab at Berkeley. Let me just begin by saying that this presentation is based on a paper of the same title that is in page proofs and will appear early next year in the American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. So, as we know, the mosquito Aedes aegypti transmits arboviral diseases at extraordinary rates. And dengue alone affects perhaps 50 to 100 million people each year, with over 3 billion at risk globally. And that results in an extraordinary economic burden. And this transmission indicates that current approaches to prevention are simply inadequate. And it calls for a paradigm shift from one that largely promotes vertical chemical-based control and vaccine development to one that also concentrates on eliminating the mosquito through actions by the communities it plagues. So we've developed a new platform called DengueChat, which is available at DengueChat.org, to advance community interventions in arbovirus vector control. It is an interactive social and software platform combining open source digital communication technologies with face-to-face assemblies. Using DengueChat, we conducted a 19-month pilot study in 5 neighborhoods in Managua, in Nicaragua, and the results were remarkable. Now, given the massive failures in dengue prevention, it's encouraging that the World Health Organization and the Pan American Health Organization recognize the need for a paradigm shift and advocate that the most sustainable approach to curb arboviral disease is to develop integrated vector control strategies. And these include initiatives that focus on, as Marco was just telling us, on the reproductive modification of mosquitoes, on engaging municipalities for improved environmental management, and more important, we think, incorporating community mobilization as a key component. In practice, however, despite some early success strategies, community interventions based on how residents live with mosquitoes have received much less attention and investment in the last decade. Now, research also suggests that new digital communication technologies involving residents could provide significant opportunities to reinvent arbovirus control. Yet to date, these technologies overwhelmingly focus on mapping and reporting. And while they are certainly fundamental in any integrated approach, there is little to no evidence that maps by themselves motivate people to take action that reduces dengue risk. As a result, the proposed integration of community engagement in vector control strategies has not yet materialized at scale, and residents do not participate systematically in risk reduction. So precisely to advance community engagement in preventing arboviral diseases, the Social Apps Lab and the School of Public Health at Berkeley have developed a new resource. All right, so we developed this new resource called DengueChat. And DengueChat is an interactive social and software platform designed to motivate residents both to identify and to eliminate mosquito breeding sites. And in collaboration with the Sustainable Sciences Institute in Nicaragua, we launched DengueChat as a pilot study in Managua from 2014 to 16. Since then, several of the intervention neighborhoods in Managua continue to use DengueChat to systematically reduce dengue infestation without any external support. In addition, its use for dengue control has expanded to Asunción in Paraguay and for Zika control in Nicaragua in 2017 to 2019. The fundamental premise of DengueChat is threefold. First, reducing entomological indices through sustained community engagement results in significant reduction in arbovirus risk at neighborhood levels. Second, communities affected by arboviral diseases are the best sources of information about positive and potential mosquito oviposition sites, and therefore the best agents for their elimination. And third, using the software in combination with face-to-face organization significantly enhances community mobilization to eliminate mosquitoes. Now, these three components together constitute an initiative in which residents using DengueChat become essential participants in data collection, analysis, and action. Moreover, DengueChat considers that residents collectively own the data they collect. It approaches arboviral vector control as a problem of social mobilization and collaborative deliberation, in which the challenge is to motivate or is to translate residents' knowledge of their neighborhoods into specific data of vector control as a means to motivate them to act. The question is always motivation. Now, implementing this approach, we conducted this 19-month pilot study of DengueChat in Managua from October 2014 to May 2016 within the existing social framework of a community-based volunteer brigades called the Brigades for Health and Life. And the pilot established a baseline entomological assessment prior to DengueChat's deployment in 5 intervention neighborhoods and 5 control neighborhoods without the intervention, and subsequent entomological assessments measured impact. Now, let me just say, before I go through the slides, that DengueChat platform is both socialware and software. And here the term platform emphasizes the construction of both a structure and an opportunity as in a platform for public discussion that incorporates multiple resources for specific purposes. We coined the term socialware to emphasize that DengueChat is based on a social model of a particular type and intended for a particular purpose, namely to organize participation of residents in arbovirus vector control. Now, in constructing DengueChat, we developed 5 components to guide the articulation of socialware and software. One is that we developed a social model of community organization. The second is we developed an intervention plan. The third is a software application that articulates the social model and the intervention plan. And fourth is a commitment to collaborating with residents in research, pedagogy, and development. And the fifth, is a close attention to the politics of information, because as we know, dengue, Zika, chikungunya are extremely politicized. The software consists of a website, a mobile app, an application programming interface, and a database layer. Let's see. It features 2 sides. One, DengueChat community engages organized residential groups with the aim of educating and mobilizing community residents in mosquito vector control, and it has familiar social network characteristics, including specific feedback to encourage social behavior change for vector control. The other side, DengueChat data, stores and organizes the wealth of data that residents collect, and it keeps a detailed registry, for example, of neighborhoods, house visits, and inspections, and the status of individual breeding sites identified in DengueChat community. And it offers complex search functions with spatial and temporal parameters for inquiries and reports. Now, these 2 sides interact to produce the software workflow. And here you see the stages of step 1, identification, step 2, elimination and verification, step 3, community reporting and socialization, step 4, data organization and storage, and step 5, data analysis and visualization, all occurring around house visits, which I'll describe in a moment. The foremost element of the social model, and this is important, I think, to emphasize, is the determination of a form of assembly making among residents. Assembly making among residents capable of articulating the direct deliberation of specific variables about the evidence of mosquito infestation and prevention activity. Examples of such assemblies include local brigades, youth clubs, social or school groups, neighborhood associations, religious congregations, and sport teams. Thus, the implementation of DengueChat requires an ethnographic knowledge of the communities that intend to use it, focused on social organization, political structure, and cultural values. You can't just parachute in an app and expect it to work. A key element of the social model of DengueChat is talk, chatting, conversing, socializing, reporting about dengue, Zika, or chikungunya, or whatever is at hand, and its mosquitoes among all who participate. And this ongoing dialogue occurs both online and off. Thus, DengueChat emphasizes talking with residents in their homes about the life cycle of Aedes aegypti, of which most know very little, to establish the link between water, refuse management, and vectors. It also emphasizes online blog posting. These different kinds of on and offline talk constitute opportunities for participants to act on speech, formulated within, broadcast from, and publicly visible on a platform dedicated to arbovirus disease protection. Not Facebook, generic media, but on a specific platform dedicated to arbovirus disease prevention. Naming the platform DengueChat was one of the first collaborative contributions of the Nicaraguan participants. In terms of study design, in Managua, we selected 5 intervention neighborhoods of low socioeconomic indicators that were heavily affected by dengue, chikungunya, and later Zika, and 5 matching control neighborhoods. And the key selection criteria was that the neighborhoods actively sustain brigades of health and life, which are a legacy of the Sandinista political mobilization in the 70s, and today decentralized components of the national government's health system. Each intervention neighborhood has its own a resident DengueChat volunteer brigade, led by a facilitator hired by the project who invited community residents to join. The project supplied basic mobile phones for each brigade member, an Android-enabled mobile phone for each facilitator, a tablet and smartphone for the project coordinator, and placed one desktop computer and printer per neighborhood in the home of each facilitator as a kind of internet cafe for community use. We deployed DengueChat in the intervention neighborhoods for a full epidemic year, including 2 rainy and 2 dry seasons. Now, DengueChat activities focused on household visits initiated with an evidence-based dialogue between brigadistas and residents, centered around the mosquito life cycle, and followed by identification of key breeding sites inside and outside the home. Each brigade took responsibility for a set of approximately 120 houses in the neighborhood, completed an inspection of each home in search of water containers and receptacles, taught residents how to identify positive and potential breeding sites and how to eliminate them, and revisited homes weekly or bi-weekly to continue the dialogue and to determine if residents had incorporated specific practices aimed at removing and preventing larval habitats. Brigade members were deployed in pairs, assigned specific houses in a square block, and instructed to follow detailed inspection protocol during each visit. Their objective was to accompany residents in the process of inspecting water containers for the presence of immature forms of Aedes aegypti, especially pupa, water storage containers, wash basins, animal feeding dishes, plastic containers, and plant pots were the main focus of their observation, especially the ubiquitous and often uncovered 54-gallon barrels that store drinking water and abandoned tires. Now, the brigadistas also demonstrated specific control actions to protect water containers and best practices to control or remove other sources of standing water. The protocol called for taking a photo of containers before and after an intervention action to eliminate it, and then taking follow-up photos on a subsequent visit. This set of before and after photos constitutes a verification step. Brigade members marked and noted each principal container inspected with a unique identifier, thus creating a historical registry that could be followed over time, giving an extraordinary historical depth to the project. During subsequent visits, brigadistas checked each labeled container and annotated its status. Brigadistas made their annotations of various data points on a one-page house visit form, a visit registry that we developed based on local knowledge. We developed this paper form because residents did not have smartphones and Wi-Fi to work with in the field. We have subsequently developed a mobile version for the project in Asunción, Paraguay, where Wi-Fi was available. The brigadistas earned online points for each visit and for actions taken by residents, which were automatically added to their DengueChat profile. They earned additional points when homes remained free of positive and potential breeding sites for 2 consecutive months of brigade inspection, achieving what we called greenhouse status. At the end of each inspection day, each brigade returned to its facilitator's home or community center, where it held a socialization meeting, a kind of horizontal dialogue to discuss the day's work. And volunteers manually uploaded the form data that they collected and the photographs to a desktop computer, and then through a batch upload to the DengueChat website, a kind of vertical dialogue. Data uploads were doubly checked by brigade facilitators and later audited by the project coordinators for accuracy. Uploading distributes the data to the various pages of the website, and I'm just going to run through a number of the pages to give you an idea And here's a city page in which you see photos, blogging. The teams are on the left. The greenhouses are represented on the right, and you see the ranking of those who have the most greenhouses. Again, you see the blogs. If you look at them, you realize that people are extremely enthusiastic about the blogs. And they uploaded photographs of the sort of the house visits, but also presentations that were made in the community and eventually in the Department of Health in the city of Managua. Here you have a before and after page, for example, that shows the various statuses of the identified breeding site. This is a profile page that shows how many points Alicia has made, the number of eliminations she's achieved, and greenhouses. This is I'll come to this page later, but this is a page that shows the results of the brigade's efforts in terms of a statistical representation of risk in the neighborhood, another representation of the efficacy of their work in the neighborhood, user uptake, the number of greenhouses. This is interesting because this neighborhood has serious trash problem, and you see that here immediately in terms of the progress report that shows that only 60 out of 257 homes have achieved, or 23% have achieved green status. And here you have the dengue data side of the site, in which you can search for individual homes, which are all coded, of course, and get a longitudinal sense of, as opposed, and a spatial sense of how they're doing. And here you have a year's worth of investigations into one single home, showing you the kinds of the findings, and it's easy to spot the recidivism when one site has gone back to being potential or even positive. Again, different kinds of correlations that are made, the use of heat maps and the like, user growth and activity, various measures of uptake of the app. All right. So we did 4 entomological surveys, 1 at baseline and 3 for monitoring impact and development, and they were conducted by professional entomologists trained by the Ministry of Health. Each survey included approximately 100 houses per neighborhood, calculating the classic Breteau container house, pupa per household, and pupa per container indices, among other values. We measured the effect of using DengueChat at 18 months after the initiation of activities, and we estimated the relative risk reduction for the intervention group as compared to the reference group for all entomological indices calculated from larval and pupal counts. We performed 2 statistical tests to estimate the effect of DengueChat at the household level, accounting for neighborhood. First, we performed a cluster T test to determine the difference in household index positivity between intervention and control, with the neighborhood as the unit of analysis. And second, we performed a clustered permutation test to evaluate the effect of the intervention on household positivity. We accounted for variables previously identified to independently affect household entomological status, such as the number of houses evaluated in each neighborhood, water access, chemical treatment, and community organization. With regard to results, during the 19 months of deployment, the pilot study reached approximately 4,000 residents in 5 neighborhoods and monitored regularly 3,200 water barrels, hundreds of tires, and thousands of other containers during 7,300 house visits. The development of the platform, DengueChat, both its social and software, provoked and responded to 4 kinds of considerations among participants: the socialization of evidence, motivation, collaborative design, and the value of using software for all 3. We used the SEPA concept of socialization of evidence for participatory action to emphasize the importance of evidence-based discussions to motivate residents to take actions of vector control. And these discussions consisted of various forms of chat about the evidence of mosquito infestation that the brigadistas find, and DengueChat added an online socialization of evidence to SEPA's traditional in-person assembly. Other forms of on and offline socialization were also important. They included discussions among facilitators and brigadistas about the science of arboviral disease and control practices, as well as the informatics of the software platform and its management of data. Both occurred in the assemblies and in the blog posts, and both the science and the informatics held the attention and commitment of the adolescent brigadistas, male and female. We found that these on and offline socializations of evidence gave residents confidence to learn about arbovirus disease and fight the mosquito with particular actions. And this realization transformed them from victims of disease into proud agents of prevention who could achieve source reduction with their own resources. Additionally, DengueChat employed a number of socialization strategies to motivate residents that are specific to the software and demonstrate its merits. A crucial one is to display the results of evidence efforts as quickly and directly as possible. And this only the software can do. Thus, the DengueChat website shows this return on investment, you might call it, by providing easy to interpret graphic representations of infection risk in a neighborhood based on the number of houses with positive red and potential yellow breeding sites, and the number of greenhouses without either for over 2 consecutive months. As the data are uploaded in real time, DengueChat generates 2 kinds of graphic risk analysis. Change in risk over time in your neighborhood for dengue, Zika, and chikungunya, and progress, as you see here. These real-time website assessments of risk became the focus of considerable community interest and conversation as residents turned to them to demonstrate the efficacy of their efforts. Now, the software promoted 2 additional strategies to motivate participation: certain kinds of gamification and internet recognition. And we found both to be very effective, especially among younger participants. Opportunities to earn fame as a dengue warrior or mosquito killer are internal to the website and occur through 3 features: the blog posts, the greenhouses, and individual profiles. And participants of all ages use them enthusiastically. We found a strong sense of competition among the participants to win points, and that this competition increased not only their motivation, but also their proficiency of participation. Brigadistas also developed an unexpected aspect of the software. They used the tabulations of greenhouses to make comparisons between neighborhoods, and they also notified local officials about problems in the intervention neighborhoods that the DengueChat data had pinpointed. Unexpectedly, the municipality responded with a number of interventions in one neighborhood that I mentioned earlier that was having trouble, such as trash collection, pipe water, and fumigation. Attributed by residents to DengueChat, this response was unprecedented. Now, our pilot study demonstrated the great merit of combining software and socialware for effective community-based entomology. While building on the accomplishments of earlier studies, this DengueChat combination achieved reductions in dengue risk significantly greater than traditional methods of face-to-face community engagement and education. Adding the software is clearly crucial to the production of these results, precisely because it vastly increases possibilities and scale for key aspects of community-based vector control, namely mobilization, pedagogy, sustainability, and integration with other prevention strategies, and especially because its technology engages and promotes young residents who are vital to all of these aspects. The software also enabled a vast expansion of the project's pedagogical component, building on the enthusiasm and aptitude of youth for digital technology. There is little doubt that the software technology increases the sustainability of DengueChat as an initiative in vector control because it improves the chances of recruiting a new cohort of young people as older participants cycle out. So let me discuss the entomological impact to conclude. The results of the seasonal entomological survey show that neighborhoods where DengueChat was deployed had reductions in all entomological indices, in all time points measured with respect to the matched neighborhoods. We measured the effect of the intervention with DengueChat between March 2015 and March 2016 and found significant reductions in the productivity of containers used as breeding sites by Aegis aegypti. We used classical entomological surveys conducted in approximately 100 households per neighborhood to determine total larval and pupal containers, about a total of 818 houses. Larval and pupal counts had significant reductions during the 19 months of the pilot study from baseline levels in the October rainy season to exit levels in March, the dry season, in both the intervention and the control neighborhoods as expected, going from rainy to dry. The reduction was greater in the DengueChat neighborhoods, 95%, than in the control neighborhoods, 86%. However, a remarkable change occurred during the 12 months between March 2015, the onset of the dry season, and March 2016. During this period, larval plus pupal indices were dramatically reduced by 44% in the DengueChat neighborhoods, whereas the control neighborhoods had an increase of 507%. 44 versus 5, for a reduction of 44% versus an increase of 507%. To determine the significance of these observations, we estimated relative risk reduction for the intervention group as compared to the reference group. The house index was reduced by 71%, Breteau by 75%, container by 83%, and pupae per container by 99%. The pupae per house was reduced by 99%. All had a 95% confidence interval in relation to control neighborhoods. Notably, the pupae per container index, which is an indicator of productivity of breeding sites, was reduced to levels unlikely to sustain transmission of arbovirus, that is, to less than 0.1 pupae per 100 containers in intervention neighborhoods. Now, many public health professionals and government officials assume that community-derived data are of questionable integrity and validity. DengueChat challenges these assumptions by empowering communities to generate their own data and facilitating analysis and interpretation regarding risk. To validate the crowdsourced data in DengueChat that residents collected, we compared the entomological indices represented in DengueChat as a percent of households positive for larva or pupa to the values obtained by professional external entomological interpretations at the rainy season baseline, 2 dry season measurements, and a final post-study rainy season measurement. These external measurements demonstrate that the community-derived entomological indices represented in DengueChat coincide with the actual house index measured by professional entomologists during equivalent time points. Thus, the data residents collected in DengueChat have both scientific significance and validity. The pilot study in Managua demonstrates that a combination of socialware and software mobilized residents to produce community crowdsourced data about arboviral disease that are scientifically valid, abundant, historically deep, and in these ways crucial for both preventative and predictive policies of arbovirus control. It enabled residents to reduce entomological indices of Aedes aegypti infestation and therefore disease risk significantly. This mobilization constitutes an important change in the agency of residents and their community organizations. So thanks for your attention, and we welcome discussion and questions.
Thank you very, very much, James, for that, and Josefina. Amazing, simply because, firstly, thank you. One of the reasons we'd asked you to present was that a couple of years ago, I mentioned this earlier, every year we run a ISNTD festival, which is Science Communication Festival. We give out recognition awards for apps, print, comic, TV, all in terms of communicating to communities the effort for NTDs. We gave a couple of years ago recognition prize to the government of Pakistan, actually, the government of Punjab, where they had one of the world's worst ever dengue outbreaks. I'm sure you all very well know from back in 2011, 2012. They formed an app health. The government of Punjab had informed their national IT board, and they formed this app which had lots of different parameters, including actually clinical parameters directly feeding in from hospitals. One of these sets of data that they were pulling into the app was actual entomological based data, so vector control activities, and they put a kind of third-party validation, so people were able to go in the field anywhere in the country, take a shot of the whatever field activity they've done, upturned pots and this kind of stuff, geotag that, put it into there, and the system would validate that. That was then pulled as a dashboard at government level, and they're running the regional dengue strategy, control and prevention strategy, based upon what was coming out of that app. Ever since that, we haven't seen another app that's anywhere near the level of rigor and robustness that you've just quite eloquently demonstrated there. I mean, that was quite an amazing journey, James, to be honest, because, you know, some of this, you can see it's working, the entomological productivity, the house indexes, it's working. And I love the fact that you're bringing in the new younger cohorts, and you're kind of, that, I think it's fantastic. And that's why we'd actually ask you to come. So I'd just give you a round of applause and thank you very, very much for taking the time to go that nice presentation. As you can probably see all of that on the chat boxes on your screens. We've kind of come to the end of the session. We are over by a little bit, but we want to let it go. We've still got the audience there. If I have your permission, instead of going into a really, because we're not going to have enough time to go into a properly in-depth Q&A, I'd like to end with one question that kind of unifies everything, and I'd ask that one question to all of you and get your feedback. Do I have your permission for that?
Of course.
Yeah. And we can always talk in the future. Every week we have a weekly broadcast called ISNTD Connect, which goes out every week. And we can, you know, have a look and perhaps bring some of this into that in the future. So I'm sure we'll have future conversations. And you may not know this, but we run the World Dengue Day campaign with the Secretariat, Marianne and myself. We're asking the United Nations and the WHO to ratify an official World Dengue Day to galvanize all the different disciplines and provide an event horizon to bring people together. We've already, you know, with the United Nations General Assembly, we've had that in the 75th General Assembly. We did a side meeting, World Health Assembly, we've done that. We've got about 30,000 plus signatures on a global petition asking for that. And I'm going to send you some information about that after. We'd love to bring you into that somewhat for your work on dengue at least. So we'll talk about that in the future. The question, all day we've heard the importance of community, whether that's mayors, the political class, whether that's in Dr. Beatrice's presentation, the farmers, the agricultural sector. We've heard this entire kind of move that we have to go multi-sector, we have to bring in different sectors, communities, all the way down to children in Marco's, what we can do when we bring into this kind of thing. So the question, I guess, is this, because you haven't got time, I want to ask this question. What would be your message, given you are the bridge, all of you, whether it's Beatrice's work with farmers, whether it's Marco's work with the mayor and the community there on the island, or your work with this app, you're kind of providing a bridge or elements of a bridge that's going to take entomological hard data. It's going to kind of get into those communities, lay people, not entomologists, not medical professionals, people. This is what we're talking about, right? Neglected tropical diseases, neglected people, actual communities of people. You are providing that bridge with this, with your individual approaches. So the question is, what would be your take-home message to organizations such as the WHO that are setting the eradication, elimination, funding organizations that are bringing consortiums together to get to those elimination and eradication targets? They've all recognized we have to get the community involved, engaged. We hear these words all the time. What would be your take-home message? I'd like to ask that to Josefina first, because I understand you're one of the founders of the Sustainable Sciences Institute outside of this webinar, which is absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to ask the same question to all of you. What would be your message to those kind of organizations, the UN, the WHO, in terms of getting the communities? Over to you, Josefina.
Hey, thank you. I don't know if my signal is good, but I want to try to answer the question. I would first say that to pay attention to communities, that communities have the best knowledge about their local situation. They are the best sources of knowledge. And also that community, the people, have the capacity to understand science and data, and that science and data are great motivators. So do not underestimate the capacity of people, and engage them from, with data and with knowledge. We tend to think that because people are poor or are not formally educated, they are incapable. They actually make the best entomologists. Community entomologists are amazing, are more precise than the paid entomologists from the Ministry of Health in our experience. So I would say do not underestimate their capacity, and engage them with data and science. I don't know if
that's a great answer. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. It came out crystal clear, Josephine. That's a great answer. Beatrice, I'd like to ask you that question. You're involving yourself with the actual farming community right in there, in terms of farmers. They seem to have a knowledge gap there in terms of this transmission, kind of perceptions on transmission. Well, whereas on the other side of it, they're very aware, they've got a knowledge gap when it comes to the clinical manifestations of the disease. However, they're very aware that the fly, the vector, is the cause. So 90% of them in your cohort recognize that the fly, tsetse fly, is to blame, but then only 20% of them have this kind of knowledge of the clinical symptoms. Given that what you're doing is engaging, what would be your take-home message to organizations such as the WHO, such as the UN, in terms of community? Beatrice, I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
We can't hear you.
Yeah, not sure the question is my problem. Okay,
so Marco, we can ask that to you then. The question is that, given what you're doing, we will ask you, what would be your take-home, what would be your message to these organizations in terms of the community?
Okay, I mean, in our experience, we feel that the community wants to be a part of the solution. They just want to participate, and it's really important to involve them, not only to do things in the field to be helped by them, but involving them also in the data production. So citizen science could be a fantastic instrument in this direction, because the involvement is from the start, not just a solution that is coming from the high and you say them what they have to do. They should be considered a part of the solution, a very important part. The second point I think it's really important is to meet the community, to know them, to interact with them, and also using social instruments like the fantastic app developed by James' team. I think this is another very important part of the story. And third, the involvement also of administrators in the story, not just to ask permission and logistics and stuff like this. In our experience, one of the key aspects was the involvement of the mayor as a volunteer. So his example in managing, he's a busy man with lots of things to do, but he was able to manage an ovitrap for 1 year. Every single week, he brings to us in a collection point a strip of paper with text on. And so this was a very powerful example for the community. So I think we have to rethink a bit the interaction with politicians, because also they are citizens and they can do citizen science as well. And the effect of their example is, I think, very, very powerful part of the story. So I think we should change the way we look community, we look their administrators, and we have to involve them since the start of the project in data production, not only in doing actions on the field.
Yeah. Well, that's a fantastic answer. Less of a prescriptive approach and more of an inclusive grassroots, more of a movement, if you want to call it that, more of a movement type of, cohesion, if you want to call it that. It's very interesting. You mentioned the mayors there. One of the attendees here, we had the Global Director for Medical Affairs for Dengue for Merck Sharp Dome, Dr. Rosabelle Drury, with global responsibility for medical affairs. And she was saying in a private chat there that I also thought about the important role of the mayors, given the local involvement, and there's a lot of parallels there in terms of vaccine confidence as well. So there's so much more you can bring out of the community if you believe, as you said, Marco, solutions are at the community level, at some level or another, within some kind of form or another. So absolutely inclusive and non-prescriptive. I'm absolutely with you on that. Beatrice, I think you're having some sound issues. I've just seen your text, which I'm really sorry for. I was going to ask you about children in the involving children in terms of the children of the farmers that you were working with, in terms of perhaps impacting their will to kind of purchase this solution, engaging them on. James, what would be your take? I know you're head of the social apps labs, and I think you've probably got a great handle on the new generation coming through in terms of what are their behaviors.
I'd like to make 4 very quick points. The first is that the term community
paradigms that they're involved in decision making. Yeah,
I think the first is that the term community is often quite vague, and what we need is a social model that is developed through local ethnographic knowledge. I'm an anthropologist, but it could be anthropologists, local health officials, social workers who are able to identify the specific groups in a community that I call it that can carry the weight of these kind of efforts. They can be school groups, soccer, sports clubs, brigades like the Sandinista brigades, church groups, poker clubs. It doesn't really matter. What we need to find, we need to use the local knowledge to specify which groups, who in the community can really do this. I think that that's the fundamental first step. So there has to be a social model, which is very different from the top-down approach. Very different from the top-down approach. The second point is the one that Josefina also mentioned, that I want to slightly rephrase, in that, residents, even with elementary education, are really good entomologists and often better than the so-called experts. And so we need to involve the experts at the beginning with a good dose of humility in terms of what experts can actually contribute, and emphasize that the local population, the residents, are very good at entomological research. The third point is involving young people with this technology is absolutely fundamental to motivation and to replenishing the inevitable attrition that occurs in these kinds of efforts. So I would emphasize the pedagogy, the scale, the fascination with technology for young people, that the things that all of our presenters today have demonstrated. I didn't get a chance to mention, but the kids in our brigades produced fantastic artwork. They produced videos and comic strips and murals. And so art was actually a very important component of the mobilization of
Cameron, if I can, I want just add a few words.
Oh, that's fantastic. Marco. Sorry.
Yeah, this very important point that James underlines about the requirement to meet the community and to have, let's say, interaction with them, to know in details how cool they are. So just to tell you that our friends from the Academy of Fine Arts, the MTA artists, the relational artists, have a very interesting approach to start to work in an area, with a community living in an area. So they start just living there in a group of, let's say, 100 students. Every day, stay there 3-4 hours, just living there, in order to create a relationship with people of the area and know them, just to keep information about who they are. So slowly, they become a part of the community. So this is fantastic, because they live there for, let's say, 3 months. And every day they interact with people, and they foster interaction between them and the people, and between people. So some people start to become friends just because of their action on the area. So in the end of this process, after some months, they are part of the community. And so when they propose something to the community feel as something that is arising from this interaction. So this is a fantastic approach, and this is exactly what we want to test next year on the island. But doing together, not only as artists, but also as a scientist, being part of the community in order to know in details them, and then propose actions to control mosquito. So this is very interesting, in my opinion. I want to share, because I missed to tell this in the talk.
I think that's a fundamental point. Basically, champions and advocates for this from within the community, they're going to speak the same language as the community. They're going to be trusted. You don't have the trust deficit. It's all there. So absolutely with you on that. We ourselves, company actually as well, on the cycle called Acting for Health. And we've got peer review out there that we're working on now in terms of various projects. We've gone out with Uganda, Ethiopia, and Tanzania for water contact behavior. And exactly the same thing that we've seen. You have a sustainable solution, because we've left, and they're now going into schools with this play. They make a play experience in their own language about their water contact behavior and health-seeking behavior for various, for schistosomosis actually. But fascinating that what the role of champions and within the community. We've been there on that, we're with you on that one as well. I mean, that's a great series of answers there. Beatrice, I'm not sure, I don't know, you said you've got some sound issues on your side in terms of internet stability there from what you just put into the chat there. So I don't know if you can hear me. If you're not, then we'll have to continue this conversation. It would have been fascinating to know how you would have then furthered your studies by looking at these farmers, reimagining their communities and bringing their children into it potentially, the local government people, all of it. I think it would have been fascinating to see. We know it was an empirical study, but it was more for your interaction with the community that we wanted to kind of have that Q&A. But I'd just like to say thank you very, very much.
Sorry,
to everybody,
if you could give me
the panelists,
okay.
To yourself, Marco, to Josefina, to James and Beatrice for a wonderful session. A wonderful end session for the day, and also a huge round of applause to the audience, ranging from the head of the CDC, Qatar, to all the way to Dr. Niang from Dakar in Senegal. I really, really hope that this discussion furthers everybody's work, some ideas are generated, and ultimately some collaborations are formed. So, you know, over to you guys and the rest of the world. We will definitely be putting the video out on right across social media. It's come to the end of the day. It's been an absolutely roller coaster of a day where we've started off with COVID, navigating vector control through the headwinds of COVID, the global COVID response, all the way through to surveillance, molecular surveillance, all the way through to control policies affecting that, urbanization with the UN Habitat and WHO, then this leveraging communities end session. Thank you very much for staying with us during the day. We will be putting this video out. I will let you know, just subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's completely free. It's worldwide. You get all of our output on there. If you can, it's a busy week for us. I thought I might as well plug this. Tomorrow is we've got a joint full day with MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières. We're looking at this, our second foray into a very, very neglected disease called NOMA, which is a polymicrobial disease prevalent in the Sahel, Western Sahel of the region of Africa, with a kind of foci in a place called Sokoto, Nigeria. It's a horrifying, completely preventable through wash, community engagement, oral hygiene, all sorts of kind of issues around that. And we'll be broadcasting that live tomorrow all day. So bear with us. And outside of these meetings that we have, every week you can see our ISNTD Connect broadcasts, which are there for everybody, completely free to access. And we heartily encourage north, east, south, west access to that. It's kind of from the people for the people. So we're really happy to see you all there. I think we can kind of, this kind of is the end now. So for everything, a huge thank you to everybody. The links are on there and the various bits and pieces that are being posted in the chats, including the MSF and NOMA Research Day for tomorrow. Please do get a chance kind of involvement of the research community around that. So it would be great to see we've got the WHO there as well tomorrow. So that would be great. Another round of applause for the panelists, I think, and a bell. Fantastic efforts. Thank you.
Sorry about my internet.
Berkeley, late afternoon in Kenya. Marco, you're probably the same as us here in London, an hour or so, right? With probably better weather, I'm sure. It's absolutely foul outside. It's London. It's October. Nothing more to kind of add to that. Thank you very, very much. Wishing you all a wonderful evening. Stay safe, everybody, and let's beat NTDs. All right. Take care, everybody. I'm going to sign off now.
Thank you.